ancestral celebration. How many extras were you dressing there?
We actually dressed 700. We made 700 costumes, and each costume had multi-layers, and they each had their own jewelry, and no two were exactly alike. Neil Scanlon did these amazing prosthetics, hands. We lengthened the arms. We just wanted to do everything we could to take away any kind of, I mean, there were humans inside, and so we wanted to distort that and take away any likeness. And so the costumes were fit in such a way to kind of change their countenance and their silhouette, take away their necks. And so, I mean, it was a huge undertaking. I think that was the most difficult costuming in the film, just because of the sheer numbers, and also the fact that we were going to be dressing them in the heat of the Jordanian desert. And everything was hand-dyed, everything was handmade. It was something we started very early on in the process, because we knew how demanding it was going to be and how long it was going to take.
And was there any cultural inspiration for their looks? I know it's supposed to feel alien, but also one of the tricks that Star Wars often pulls is it takes real things from our world and just changes them a little bit, distorts them a little, and gives us a new perspective. Was there any type of like tribal wear or something that gave you inspiration for how they would look?
Well, JJ and I talked early on, and he wanted it to be very colorful, which I knew did not mean every color in the world, because that would look very cheap and it really wouldn't kind of belong in the world that George Lucas had informed us of. And so, you know, I came up with this color palette, and we hand-dyed everything in, you know, maybe 5 different colors, and then different shades of each one of these 5 colors. So it was very limited and controlled. And the fact that they were all hand-dyed, and I think gave it that kind of a tribal feeling.
Rick, you have the challenge of finding impossible places in this movie that don't really exist in the real world. What was it like developing these worlds, these headquarters, these temples, and how did you work with the visual effects teams to bring them to life?
What do you mean that they don't exist?
I don't know, can you, no, if they do exist, I think
Well,
there's a big tourism boom about
That's
to
what
happen
made the design part of the movie so easy. Because with Kevin as a co-designer and Rosemary as a set decorator, we just went out in our, you know, X-Wings, and we went to various places that JJ and Chris would suggest, that Dan said that he could photograph, like a cave that's big enough for a blockade runner, or a desert that has a sand trap.
Rick is still joking.
And you know, like an ancient city. But you know what was really easy was when we found that place in the ocean, and I said to Roger and Patrick, so let's just put the piece of the Death Star here. And
Build a real Death Star.
And then we'll just have put the
built part.
And you kind of shoot it however they want to shoot it. I mean, the point is that in Star Wars you get to go to magnificent places that are really beyond anybody's imagination except for these 2 guys. And then the rest of us have to come in and figure out, in this most joyous of ways, actually, as much work as it is, how to make all of that come to life. And the visual effects team, I mean, did you see when it said digital artists, what happened on the screen? Like a wall that just climbed and climbed. And on a physical level, what Rosemary and Kevin and the whole art team was able to do with physical sets was magnificent, because there was so much, I guess, just purposefulness to making a variety of worlds that we got to show in this movie. And for me, that was a big thrill.
One of the things that Roger, you taught me when we were doing Mission Impossible 3 years ago was, you know, anything that we can shoot, that we can have, you know, is better than nothing. Like anything you can do. And it was sort of this mantra we used as we went along, certainly on other projects, but mostly on Force Awakens, and then even more so on this one, And it's funny when, Michael, you're talking about how Oscar kind of had a swagger when he was, in his wardrobe. It reminded me of Daisy when we were doing Force Awakens and how BB-8 would be there. And we talked about having BB-8 be a completely CG character for a while, and then we decided, well, we'll puppeteer it and we'll CG out the puppeteer. And I remember she'd come to set, literally in between, takes, she's like, hi, she'd like say hello to BB-8. Like, her interactions with BB-8 were emotional because he was physically there. And I think that the sets that we built, the costumes that everyone wore, having the actors surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of these Aki-Aki characters there, not only did it give, Roger, you and Pat and your whole team, and those, thousands of names that you saw, but it gave, something to adhere to match, but it also gave the actors what to interact with, and it changed everything about their behavior, and we could actually light things, and when we were cutting things, it wasn't green screen and blue screen all the time, though of course there was tons of that as well. But it was really, it's just something to behold when you see all those names, and each one of those, 3,500 names that you saw, were people that obviously, as you well know, spent countless hours away from their families and friends to make this happen. And I'm so grateful for not just what, the visual effects team did, which is mind-blowing, and I think the best work I've seen, but also how important it was to actually shoot these amazing sets that we built. And I think it was a dozen times I went to different sets and my jaw hit the floor, and I couldn't believe we were lucky enough to get to shoot on these actual
More dazzling one.
Well, I mean, the cave, the Blockade Runner cave, literally it's all the sets. The Kijimi, the Snowy City, was an entire city that was built on the back lot at Pinewood. When we did the lightsaber battle in the wreck, of course those waves weren't there, but all the water that's bursting around them and landing, on them was, they were 50-foot tall, water cannons were,
Yeah, I mean, to be honest though, I've asked myself, well, why did we have all those water cannons? Because actually what we did was we got rid of all the water, and then we added all the water back. You might ask yourself, well, why did we do all of that? Well, the thing is that what you're doing is you're creating the tangibility of somebody having a saber fight on a piece of set, and they're surrounded by water. And if we hadn't done that, then Daisy and Adam would just be fighting, and they wouldn't. You would have nothing to work against. So, in fact, the irony is that Dom Tui, the special effects guy, did all the water, and that created the mood of that piece. But then what we did was then we erased all of that water, because a water cannon does not behave like a wave hitting the side of that pier. So we got rid of all of that and then added our water back in that was behaving correctly. So, I mean, that's why, it sounds mad, but the truth is, that's why it really looks
Well, that's
as though
not mad. To get the water to behave correctly?
But, I think part of the job of the visual effects team is always trying to almost make everything we're doing sort of disappear and be invisible, and, when you're seeing, the 1,900, 2,000 shots in a movie or something, the idea is not to think of it like a visual effects movie. You want to believe that you're really in these places. I mean, that's why, Michael did 700 real Akis, we did 50,000 digital Akis, the way, but it works because we have the 700 real ones.
Well, imagine what